When viewed from space, we can see some of the formidable footprint we humans make on this planet. Many of the aspects of human life have recently changed, have passed a threshold that demands we approach life in radically new and different ways. We can no longer forge ahead assuming that an endless world of resources awaits our manifest destiny. We can no longer get away with the philosophy of the ends justify the means. As human beings, we have, in a relatively short time, become too successful for our own good. Successful at creating remarkable but unsustainable societies, cultures, and industry using only a limited portion of the human toolkit. We've mastered the proverbial hammer, and right about now we could use a few other tools to help us succeed in a new and more sustainable way. It was allegedly Albert Einstein who said, "The significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them." The Presence Project is a deliberate exploration of a few key questions. If we have used a limited portion of human resources, intelligence, and methods to get us to this brink, what are the other tools and resources we might use to solve our dilemma? How do we reach Einstein's other level of thought? Reaching a new level will require new ways of thinking and being. It will require courage and focus. It will require curiosity and care. It will require presence. Hello and welcome back to Presence. If you've watched recent shows, you saw the last two episodes, which I called The Great Extraction, and they were very political and very much about the financial situation of the world and of the USA. And I realized they were a bit intense, and so I'm hoping to bring a bit of a lighter tone to this set of three shows that we'll be doing. And no less important than things political or financial. What greater opportunity do we have to bring a particular presence to the world than in our relationships? And that's as social as one wants to be, and also as intimate as one wants to be. There's this broad and deep proving ground, if you will, for what kind of presence do we bring forth in the world. And I have a couple of guests for this 3-session series. And they'll be, both of them are with me today in this first episode, and then we'll be going into more detail with each of them in particular. And so we're back out to showing us all. So we have Renee Jeffus and Robert Wagner. And really a pleasure to have you both here. And why I have you both here is that I get a strong sense that you both have something to say about if we've gone just about as far as we can go in the paradigm that we're all in now. And we've gotten ourselves to kind of the brink of some negative impact. It's pretty much undeniable. And I believe that that's also true in relationship. Our inner world, often our ability to generate presence on our own solo, but especially in our way of interacting with others, and most importantly, our intimate others. So I invite you both to speak. We're all three together in this particular one, so there's a chance to see what kind of work both of you do individually, and then also to see how do they parallel with one another. I have a feeling that there's quite a bit of potential, at least parallel, if not interweaving. So I'd like to just see how well we can do that weaving together in this particular session. And then, as I mentioned, we'll get a chance to speak more particularly with each of you about the details of your work, as much as you'd be willing to share. in the next 2 sessions of this series. So
Great.
who can
Happy to
begin
be
about
here.
what is this stuff that you all do?
Oh, wow. Well, do you?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, what do I do? That's actually a question that I don't actually often think that much. It's more of like, what do I be, right? And the name of your show, obviously Presence, there's, whether it's in my work or in my relationships or in my family life, it's about cultivating that deep presence that can help bring more love and joy in the world. And so my work, which is specifically within ancient Tantra, intimate relationships, women's empowerment work, sacred dance, all cultivating ways that we can really embody a more authentic, alive, vibrant, and joyful presence, because that's one of the most profound ways that we're affecting the world, and how to cultivate that within ourselves, but then also to invite that from our beloveds, from our partners, from our children, from our close friendships, and really anybody that we're in touch with or in contact with, is how to invite that that more alive, vibrant, embodied, grounded, open-hearted presence that helps to cultivate a more peaceful and joyful world together. You know, both, and it starts at home in ourselves, and then it moves to our intimate relationships, our families, our communities, and ultimately the whole world. So I really see that. I love the name of your show, so it's perfect. It's all about presence.
And I love what you said. It starts with the individual, and then it goes into the relationship, and then into community. So my work it starts with self-love, and it begins self-love, self-awakening, self-empowerment. And the tool that we use is the Vision Quest ceremony. And that is an opportunity for an individual to go out into the wilderness alone and have that one-on-one with nature, spirit, if you will, and just have that opportunity to really drop in, to find out, who am I? Why am I here? What are my gifts? How do I show up? And then to bring that back to your partner, to your intimate relationships. And then ultimately is to give your gifts to the community, to your people. And it's the time. I mean, the way of doing things in the past, got us to this point. And where do we go from here? And I really believe that it all starts with each of us, with our own gifts, with our own awakening, and bringing that forward.
Robert, can you say a little something about it? Both of you have evidently a way of working with individuals and with groups that has people become far more self-aware, far more open and disclosing of their process. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So I'd be curious if you could mention, and then perhaps Renee, you could also speak to what are trends that you see of the way it's been done in our past collectively that show up, that need to get cleaned up or cleaned out or cleared out, or an alternative needs to be generated in terms of a particular way of being, or even just a way of doing in the world that, I can't imagine a more microscope clarity that you get in a Vision Quest situation in which, how long are people out with you in that type of event?
Okay. Typically it's 7 to 9 days is the Vision Quest, but the part that they're on their solo journey is usually 3 to 4 days and nights. So there's definitely an edge for most people stepping into this, especially in our culture. In Native cultures, it was part of their way of life.
Sure.
But in this Western culture, it tends to be a little bit more, it's an edge, a big edge for a lot of us to step out from our lives, to sever from our day-to-day activity, to meet in a group into the wilderness and actually spend time preparing for that solo journey. And for us to be alone without all our technology and all our support systems, to sever from all that and be alone and just be quiet. A beautiful process of unfolding takes place where who you are starts to shine more as the other aspects fall away.
It's those other aspects that I was just asking about, and I'm just curious if you've seen any trends, things that tend to be a little more difficult for folks to let go of than others? Is there anything comes to mind when I ask that?
For people, the step, I get a lot of inquiries, but the real challenge for most people is to actually disengage, to let go. There's a desire to make a transition in one's life, and a vision quest is a beautiful way to help one bridge that transition. And it's just facing that fear, if you will, of being alone, being disconnected, and allowing yourself to come forward. And so it's, for a lot of people, there's an interest, there's this desire, but there's a little bit, I don't know if I'm quite ready for this yet. And with some conversation, that people tend to soften to it and like, okay, I'll listen. I'll show up. If you help me make this transition. That's my role, is sort of, in a way, like a midwife, to help people make the transition from one aspect of their life to the next. Or to let go of something that's been holding them back and to step in more into who they really are.
Got it.
I mean, even in my personal life, I've always had this, the first half of my life, I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And now I totally believe that each of us are showing up here with gifts. And it's time to start to realize what those are and bring them to our people. We can't keep being small anymore. It's time for us to really start to shine who we are, give our presence, if you will, to the world in all aspects.
Renee, anything come to mind in this particular conversation of, the word midwife came through and stuck for me, but in your process work with people and yourself, do you notice pieces that tend to be a little more stubborn, that don't want to fall away as easily, or any part of the process that you've noticed?
Well, I
that
think
way?
Robert just spoke to probably one of our biggest obstacles, which is we are conditioned in our society to show up in a certain way. That isn't necessarily our own authentic way of being, and isn't also necessarily embracing our gifts. And so I see that when I'm working, I particularly work with women, and to help women remove the shame and the guilt and the supposed tos and the have tos, and this is what I'm supposed to look like and this is how I'm supposed to show up in the world, to be able to remove all of that and step through that conditioning so we can really show up more authentically. And the more that we can show up authentically and in a loving, accepting place with ourselves is also the pathway to having that more authentic and loving connection with others. So, one of the ways that we really work with that is by helping people come down and in. So I like to say that a lot, down and in. There's so much of a tendency and a paradigm of really not being at home within ourselves, not being at home within our bodies, not being at home with our sensual, natural selves. Everything's very controlled. Everything is very dictated as to how we should behave. And so we do a lot of practices and a lot of exercises that help women and men come more alive in their bodies and in their presence and in their hearts, so that we can really feel each other. There is also the paradigm of so much of relating and so much of our life is from more of our heads, and to be able to drop into more of a feeling, open, connected place is where true relationship really happens. And of course our minds play a part in all of it. It's not to say we shouldn't think at all or anything like that, but it's about really activating the heart and honoring ourselves as human beings here to have these amazing experiences both on our own and with others. And how do we really come alive to do that? And I know your work really helps people do that.
Yeah, I love how you said that, coming alive, because I believe we all have this wildness within us, this aspect of ourselves that just really wants to come out. But we tend to hold it behind different roles or different masks of who we are or how we show up. But to really take that opportunity and just let that wildness come out. And I mean, wildness is more the authentic me. It's not like I'm going to be wild and crazy, but that authentic me to really shine and show up. Because that sense of being small just isn't serving anymore. You know, doing things just right so I don't irritate my friends or make them feel uncomfortable. I think we need to step out more and to really be bright lights and encourage our friends to and family to shine too.
Yeah.
Give them the permission as well.
Yeah. It's making me think of the one of my favorite quotes, the Howard Thurman quote.
Yes.
What the world really needs is people who have come alive. And it's, you know, I mean, that's, to me, that expresses all of it, because when we're fully alive, when we're really dropped in and we're in our heart space, we're in our bodies, we're inhabiting our lives, we're present, we're touching in completely, that's where the magic is. And that's where, you know, a lot of our deep inner guidance comes. It's where we know intuitively and in our beings how to be both with ourselves and be with others, and have that deeper, authentic, beautiful connecting and love that is possible when people come together, whether it's in an intimate relationship or with my children or my friends, or, you know, it's all about presence.
Yes, it is.
And to add to that, I would say that in addition to presence, it's showing up in giving. Not so much what's in it for me, it's more what more can I give?
Yeah.
What more can I give to myself, to my partner, to my family, to my community? So it's inviting ourselves to step out from who we are and becoming so much more. And it's in that giving that I found in my life I receive so much. So when I have the opportunity to give, it's like, yeah, I'm going to get so much from this process of just showing up and being with whoever in a way that's being very present, but very honoring and sharing. So.
So we're going to do this first of a 3-part series that we're going to be recording with the two of you. And in the next 2 sessions, we're going to get into more detail about each of your work individually. But what I'm hearing is are a couple of themes, and I'd like you to just straighten me out if I'm off in what I'm hearing. And that is that both of you, a portion of your work is tremendously intimate for the people that you're working with. And my experience of the USA is that there's still a remarkably uptight kind of cultural heldness about sexual intimacy, and really intimacy of any kind. I wouldn't exactly say we're good at it, good at any of that. Any level of intimacy. Doesn't seem like America is well known for its fluidity in this domain. So first, I'm seeing you both nod. Safe to say.
Agreed, yes.
So what I've noticed in my conversations now, briefly with both of you, but also in this realm, when I've just about anyone I hear speaking about the types of fields that you both are in, and my own experience of it, is that it's remarkably little about the actual sexuality, the sexiness, or the contact and the stuff of, you know, about as close as we get is sexy movies or porn, or, you know, we have a very constricted and, I believe, stilted way of seeing intimacy of that type. And so, I'm sorry I'm making this such a long question, but what I heard you both just saying now as well is that long before it's anything in physical contact and actual techniques and so on about sex, it's about the presence, the elements of presence. It's about the inner orientation. You were just talking about generosity, and that really what sparked my question is that how interesting that you've got this topic that you're bringing up called generosity, and that how does that connect with intimacy in any way? So if you wouldn't mind, either of you, if that sparks you, great, and
Yes.
you're welcome to take a different direction, but I was just particularly noticing your mentioning of that, and both of you have been talking about things that seem distant from the notion of Tantra, and you know, a small portion of that being the actual physical techniques and so on, and touch. So if you have anything to say in response, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Well, I think for me that's also part of why I'm so passionate about sharing this work, is that there is a lot of misunderstanding around what is Tantra. And the basis of Tantra is absolute presence to our life, to our world, and to whoever's in front of us. And then it's just like this little side note of like, oh, well, there might be this nice technique, or this is one way you can help your partner heal from sexual trauma, or, you know, this is how you really connect. I mean, there's all those parts of it, but if you're not rooted in your heart, if you're not present in your body temple, then the opportunity for true connection is very small. And that's part of what I think you're speaking to about our culture. And America not really being known for very, you know, much depth and intimacy, is that there is this, there can be this tendency of withhold, of not being anchored in the heart, of being really stuck up in our heads. Trying to figure things out, or am I doing it right, or, you know, what are they thinking, are they noticing my butt, or what, you know, whatever silly things we get caught up in our minds that prevent us from really meeting not only our other, whoever we're with, but really meeting ourselves and that experience of the opening heart and of love. And the generosity piece, I mean, that's a core part of, you know, when we really love someone, and it doesn't mean that we, you know, totally sacrifice ourselves for horrible relationships or anything like that. There's absolutely the need to be empowered, but there is this outpouring that happens naturally when we can drop out of the mind, we can sink into our bodies, we can sink into presence with the moment and our hearts. There becomes this outpouring of love that is then the dance, you know?
Love it.
Can you speak to that?
And with that dance, I think the foundation is self-love. That how do we perceive ourselves? How do we hold ourselves? I always like to encourage people, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, what are your feelings? How do you perceive yourself? Do you like that reflection in the mirror? And that's where it begins. And it happens every day. We start our day. And how do I embrace myself when I look in the mirror? So if I begin to open and really love and appreciate myself as I am, because I can always find something that's not quite right. But if I really just embrace all of me, and I teach techniques to help people open to that, then I can take this self-love and then share it with my partner. And I can give it that generosity piece. And simple little technique I find, if you're in a relationship and you find something's missing, or I wish my partner was more intimate with me, I say, don't ask it from your partner, give it from yourself. So if I notice there's lack of intimacy in my relationship, I'm going to give my partner a lot of intimacy. And just by giving it, it naturally sparks that she'll bring it back to me as well. So it all starts with myself and how I show up and how I give myself in my relationships. And not just intimate relationships, in all my relationships, friendships and community. So if I can come from that self-love, that self-empowered who I am, then everything else can start to really blossom.
I appreciate how both of you answered that, and I just at the end particularly, not that it wasn't clear all the way through, but particularly you hooked us back to the notion of generosity, to the notion of, if I'm seeing a lack, how to address it is to open up that fountain, open up that generosity on my part, and that begins the flow. That handles it.
Yes.
Rather than a fixation on the lack and the lack and the lack, which would then create more lack. And well, we know that. So.
Right.
All right.
Do either of you have an example or two of the preciousness of doing the work that you do? Like, I've done a similar branch of work for quite a while, and the word that came to mind for me many times is privilege. Like, it's a privilege to do this, you know. And, actually get moved right now, but, you know, because it's hard not to. In fact, it's really, in my understanding of where the two of you are coming from, and certainly my orientation in that work is, if I'm not being it, it's not getting done. You know, it's just like that. So I'm curious if there's a particular example or two of how you are moved in the work, or how you've been moved by someone in your family, friends, or in the work that you do, inspiring you.
You want to take that one first?
Okay.
Are you ready?
Recently, I just taught a couple to give tantric healing sessions to each other, and to sit with them the next day after they've given a session, and to see that glow, that spark in their eyes of like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing that my husband has showed up for me in this way. I never thought it was possible that he could hold that space and basically love me through this healing session, so I can release what I need to release, and I'm not alone anymore. My partner, my husband's there with me. So it's not only being the work that I bring forth, it's tantric healing, it's not only being a sublime lover, but to also show up for your beloved as their healer. To allow them to step into a depth of pleasure that maybe they've never experienced in their life before.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I work a lot with women, one-on-one, and also in small classes and workshops and that kind of thing. And I'd say what shows up over and over again, unfortunately, in our culture is a lot of trauma and sexual abuse. And unfortunately, that is carried in our bodies, in our cellular memory, and in our energy, especially for women. And it really can show up as a lot of barriers to intimacy and sexuality. And so for me, something that is so personally touching and gratifying is to help women work through that and to release the shame, release the guilt, release the trauma that is stored in their bodies, so that they can actually find their joy, their pleasure, their ability to be open and connected with themselves and with their partners again. And I know it was a personal journey for myself, so that was something that I also traveled through and continue to travel through. So to help others with that, to see women really juicy and shining and alive and in their open heart, it's glorious.
Great. Well, I thank you both for joining us in the first of what, again, will be a three-part series. This is a remarkable shift from what can be usually a more political or financial or economic or whatever focus in presence. I hope you'll join us for the next two, and thank you for joining us here on Presence.